I'm really, interested in the topic, because the San Juan runs a tiny bit through our reservation right by the Four Corners. And yeah, just being able to see the color change when the king when that still happened, and just going to the Four Corners and seeing it change. So it was kind of scary, and just knowing the effects of it, and what it does to the fish and everything else that is in there. So
yeah.
So yeah, thank you for taking the time. If you have any questions about Crook Canyon, I'd be happy to answer them for you. We are a nonprofit, and we're in the progress of slowly moving towards decolonizing, added in other vocabs and other stuff. So we're kind of in the middle of a change, and so yeah, it'll be great to have you out here and take a look around and see all the cool things that are happening here. We currently have our college field school happening right now, and our interns. So we have like 7 different interns. So it's kind of cool to have and to teach. And in our American Indian Initiatives department, we have Delancey, who is our intern, who is going to school her last year coming up at Columbia.
Okay, awesome.
She's Cherokee from Oklahoma. And then we have Rebecca. Yeah, and Rebecca, who is down from Tucson. She's I know her. Do you know her? Oh, here you go.
Hi, Carletta. It's good to see you.
There you go.
Oh,
it's been
hi.
a second, but it's really good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then we have Allie, who is Kuya Indian from California, and John Jahadi, who is half Zuni and half Laguna Pueblo. So it's really cool
awesome.
to have a good amount of native folks to talk to and talk about different ideas that we have. So and our newest member is Teresa Pascual from Acoma, who is our Indigenous. Help me out, Liz.
Executive Vice President for Indigenous Affairs.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, we would love for you to come.
You have a standing invitation. We would love to host you anytime you can come.
Thank you.
So let's see.
All right, so we're just about coming up on 4 o'clock. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm Liz Perry, and joined by some of our staff here, Rebecca Hammond from our Manager of American Indian Initiatives, and everybody knows Taylor and Ben. Before I introduce our distinguished speaker today, I wanted to go ahead and welcome all of you and do our usual introduction. We'd like to begin with our land acknowledgement. Crook Canyon Archaeological Center acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Diné, and Jicarilla Apache people on whose traditional homelands our campus sits. Our work is not possible without Indigenous people in the past, present, and future, and we respectfully recognize and honor ancestral and descendant Indigenous communities for their contributions to all humankind. Crook Canyon is grateful to all Indigenous people and support the preservation and protection of cultural traditions, ancestral connections, and sacred lands. As we move into our Zoom, as usual, if you have lots of questions during the talk, if you put them right in the Q&A when they occur to you, we will always get to them, or as best we can, depending on how many there are. But it's better to put them in the Q&A than the chat in case they get lost. If Zoom is giving you a headache, we are live streaming on Facebook, and you can head over there. And our past webinars are on our YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please check it out. We've got some fantastic webinars coming up the next 2 weeks, some really interesting topics. Next week, we have the National Mustang Association of Colorado with Linda Larson and Bonnie Anderson. And the week after that, we have Native American Flutes of North America with Marlon Magdalena. So please keep tuning in to our Thursday series. And as always, a huge thank you. We could not do this at all, literally, this webinar series or really any parts of our mission without all of your generous contributions to Crow Canyon. Thank you. And as I say every week, but it's true every week, so many of you make donations every time you come to a webinar, and we are just incredibly grateful to be able to make this possible. We're extremely proud of this series and really grateful for all of the amazing folks who come and speak. We have, because we are a nonprofit, we've got a campaign going usually, but this one is our Dive into Decades of Data campaign, and want to give a huge shout out to those of you who have donated. We have, as you know, we have been here for 40 years at Crow Canyon, over 40 years now, and we have one of the largest archaeological data sets in North America. We are public access, and since we have been collecting data so long, we have a lot of work and upgrades to do on our database to make sure that it's accessible to students, to teachers, to researchers, to anyone who wants to access these data to answer questions and do their own work. So if you would like to make a gift, we would be hugely grateful. This particular webinar, we have a partnership with the Four Corners Lecture Series. And so they do some of the heavy lift on bringing speakers together and planning this series. So this particular series, you'll see throughout our webinar series, sometimes it'll be a partnership with Four Corners Lecture Series. We have 12 local organizations who share mission alignment and a dedication to the protection and preservation of cultural resources, historic sites and resources, and in particular, furthering knowledge about the Four Corners region. So we're very proud to be able to partner with the Four Corners Lecture Series and bring you our lecture today. Without further ado, I am extremely honored to introduce our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Carletta Chief, who is a University of Arizona Distinguished Outreach Faculty and Professor and Extension Specialist in Environmental Science at the University of Arizona. Dr. Chief works to bring relevant water science to Native American communities in a culturally sensitive manner. As Director of the Indigenous Resilience Center, she aims to facilitate efforts of the University of Arizona climate and environment researchers, faculty, staff, and students working with Native nations to build resilience to climate impacts and environmental challenges. Two of her primary tribal projects are the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe Climate Adaptation and Traditional Knowledge Project and the Gold King Mine Spill Diné Exposure Project. Dr. Chief also leads the National Science Foundation Indigenous Food, Energy, and Water Security and Sovereignty Program, and is currently training 38 graduate students, which is a lot. Their vision is to develop a diverse workforce with intercultural awareness and expertise in sustainable food, energy, and water systems, specifically through off-grid technologies to address the lack of safe water, energy, and food security in Indigenous communities. In 2011, Dr. Chief was named American Indian Science and Engineering Society Most Promising Scientist and Scholar. In 2013, the Stanford University Distinguished Alumni Scholar. In 2015, Native American 40 Under 40. In 2016, the AISES Professional of the Year. In 2016, the Phoenix Indian Center Woman of the Year. In 2020, the American Geophysical Union Fellow and Ambassador Awardee. And in 2022, the Wings World Quest Women of Discovery Award. Dr. Chief received a BS and MS in Civil and Environmental Engineering from Stanford University in 1998 and 2000, and a PhD in Hydrology and Water Resources from the University of Arizona in 2007. We are just honored to have you speaking to us today, Dr. Chief. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here, and wonderful to meet all of you here. And I just want to make sure my screen is showing the correct slides.
Yes, looks perfect.
Okay, wonderful. So first I'd like to introduce myself in my own language. Yate ano tsoshea tsorchi do twaharabashichin ano zatlane dashiche do tchachine dashilala akwatao a sadanshle. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here. My name is Carletta Chief. I am Bitterwater, born for near the water. My maternal grandfather is Mini Goats, and my paternal grandfather is Red Running into the Water. This is how I identify myself as a Navajo woman and Diné woman. and I'm originally from Black Mesa, Arizona. On August 5th, the image of the Yellow River was burned into our collective consciousness. The contamination of this major water source is no light matter, especially in the desert Southwest. Yet this devastation and impact to the Diné communities living along the San Juan River was not truly understood and largely marginalized. We worked with 3 communities on the Navajo Nation: Upper Fruitland, Shiprock, and Animas. These are 3 communities that are along the San Juan River and downstream of the Gold Key mine. The Shiprock chapter here, they voted not to use the river water for 1 year, and they let their crops go fallow because they had many unanswered questions about the impact of the Gold Key mine spill. And if Utah, located down further stream, is a community whose shallow groundwater wells were thought to have a cone of influence that drew from the river. The depth of the devastation and trauma to the Navajo families living along the 275-mile stretch of the San Juan River can't be truly understood unless it's seen from a historical lens of systematic racism. The Gold Key mine spill amplified historical trauma and past assaults inflicted by the US government that the Diné had endured for generations. Our project goals were to understand the short-term exposure to the spill and assess the extent of the contaminants for 1 year and understand the risk perception of the communities. The perception of the risk to the Navajo communities was based on a recreational risk assessment. And however, for the Diné, their reality was that they used the river in many different ways than just recreation. So our group used an Indigenous process of research that was informed by the Diné community partners that we worked with. The Indigenous process of research is more than producing new knowledge. It's also about community healing and also capacity building. We also emphasize the importance of Indigenous data sovereignty. At one teach-in that we held, a person specifically stated, we need our own data to communicate to the world our own perspective on our own crisis and trauma. Through the listening sessions that we held, we found out that the people were frustrated. They were scared about the use of the river, and that they were not being informed about what was going on. So in our communication to the people, we prioritize ensuring that our communication was fully thought through and that was applicable to the people. One of the things that we found out early on was that the Navajo terms were not standardized for many of the key terms such as exposure, as
Charlotta, your audio is breaking up on our end, and it's coming through very garbled. Do you want to try turning off your video to eliminate some of the bandwidth issues? Your video is freezing on our end, and it's hard to get any of the sound that's coming through at the moment.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. It seems we've got some bandwidth challenges that are coming from Dr. Chief's location. So just give us a moment. Taylor is going to try to reach her offline and see if we can come up with a fix here. So thank you all for your patience, and just hang in there with us for just a minute. We're going to work on this behind the scenes for a moment. There we are.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. I really apologize. My internet became unstable.
Yes, we have all experienced that before. Not a problem. Are you able to share your PowerPoint, or if you email it to Taylor or I, we can also share it for you.
Okay, yeah, I could do that. Hold on one second.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for your patience. We will be up and
Yes.
running in just a minute.
Okay, I've sent the PowerPoint.
Excellent. All right. So Taylor, you are up next.
I don't have it just yet, but as soon as I get it, I'll share my screen.
Okay, in the meantime, I'll go ahead and just continue talking about my project.
That'd be great.
So as I was saying, we did a survey to understand what the tradition of farming was in the community. And we found that the majority of the people learned how to farm from their immediate family. So farming was really part of the tradition of the individual family, and that there was a real culture with farming in the community. We also found that a lot of people use heirloom seeds as a main source of their planting. And from the survey, we found that they use different corn seeds, such as yellow corn and blue corn and white corn, and also squash, including winter squash, melons and watermelons. And these were some of the heirloom seeds that people shared that they had used in their planting. We also asked the impact of the spill, and the word diagram that we illustrates the impact of the spill by the number of times that word was shared, the bigger that word was stated. So people stated that they were concerned and were impacted by the loss of crops, and that many people had to stop farming. They were unsure about the safety of the water and also the use of the water for future farming, and that they had people that were relenting customers, meaning that customers that they served were concerned about buying crops from them. And so also impacted the economy of the farmers there. And contamination was huge. It was a really big concern for the people.
I think Taylor hasn't received your PowerPoint yet. I don't know if maybe your bandwidth challenges are slowing down your email, or if you want to just double check and make sure that it made it out of your sent mail.
Yes, it says it has been sent out.
Okay. Well, if you feel comfortable just sort of going forward with your talk, and we will await the arrival of the slides and put them up and catch up with you, that would be great.
Okay. Great.
Like if you wanted to keep talking as if to your slides, even though we don't have them, I think that would be fine, because she still doesn't have anything coming through to her email yet.
Okay. All right. And I can also try again to join if we want to try that.
If you think so. And maybe just put your slides up through.
Can you see my slides?
Yeah, yes, that is great. And I'm gonna go ahead. Oh, good, you already come. All right. Yeah, maybe if you leave your video off, maybe that will save bandwidth. So
okay. I apologize. I really apologize. I haven't had this happen to me in a long time.
no problem. It happens for sure.
Okay, great. So earlier in my talk, I had shared that people's reality for the Diné communities was that they really depended on the river for many different activities. However, this had never been quantified, and especially for the risk assessment was important. You need to know the number of activities and to assess the exposure of the people. So what we did was we conducted household surveys across these three communities. And we asked the people, how do they engage with the San Juan River? And we were able to tally that information up. Cultural and spiritual activities were by far the highest number, with recreation following closely behind. The other two activity categories were livelihood and arts and crafts. The Diné people engage in many different types of cultural and spiritual activities, including prayers that involve plants and sediment that are along the riparian corridor of the San Juan River. People often put bank sediments on their face for prayer and daily protection. So we were able to identify over 40 different activities. From the questionnaires that we administered with the help of the Navajo Community Health Representatives, we were able to tally the number of participants that the people engaged before the spill, which are shown in the blue bars for each participant, and then after the spill, which are indicated in the orange bars. As you can see, for each participant, most of the participants, it showed that the spill had impacted the way of life of these communities along the river. So you see that the orange bars are much smaller than the blue bars, showing the decrease in activities. Shown in a different way is in this graph, where we also looked at the differences in the categories for livelihood, recreational, spiritual, cultural, and arts and crafts before and after the spill. And you can see that for cultural and spiritual and recreational, the decrease in activities in these categories was over 60%. Livelihood was about 48% decrease, and then arts and crafts was a 15% decrease. So in these focus groups that we held across these three communities, 4 focus groups per community, we asked questions about before the spill, after the spill, and then into the future. So looking at 3 points in time and asking questions accordingly. So before the spill, we asked about how they use the water, and how they contacted the sediments or the soil, which were specifically related to the health assessment. And then any health concerns and cultural concerns. Those questions were asked before and after the spill to try to understand what was the impact or the changes of the Skokie mine spill on the people. And then after the spill, asking about impact on their individual, family, and livelihood. Also had to report the results back to the people. And then into the future, we asked about what were their concerns about long-term health and impacts or long-term health concerns. And then what were their concerns about uses of the San Juan River into the future, such as 50 to 100 years into the future. So the top concerns from the focus groups included exposure concerns, distress, cultural concerns, mental health, physical health, and financial concerns. And so for the 3 communities that we worked with, Upper Fruitland, which is a community that opened their irrigation canals after it was deemed to meet agricultural purposes. Their top concerns were exposure, distress, mental health, and financial. And for all the 3 communities, they all had exposure and distress concerns. But for Shiprock and Aneth, they did have cultural health concerns. Aneth had some mental health concerns. And then Shiprock they had some physical health concerns. Upper Fruitland, they had some financial concerns as well. So within our work, we not only got insight and guidance from our community partners, but also the traditional knowledge holders, the medicine people from the Diné Medicine Men Association, as well as all of our work was overseen by the Navajo Nation Human Research Review Board. And they provided a lot of input and feedback regarding how we were disseminating what we can and cannot disseminate. And one of the things that came out of this was ensuring that we presented and integrated the Diné fundamental law, which are demonstrated here, listed here, the traditional law, customary law, natural law, and common law. And these are all different types of law used by the Navajo people. Traditional law are the laws ordained by the great creator. The customary law is the laws or according to the holy ones. The natural laws are the laws required by the Earth Mother and the universe. And then the common law are the laws practiced by the Holy Surface people. So with our focus groups, we use this, and this was specifically asked by the Diné Medicine Men's Association, and using those laws as well as the SBNH health model, the Diné health model, and we cite Herbert Benally, who did this type of work with Hojogo Dashado towards a construct of balance in Navajo cosmology. And so we used his model to center the research process to ensure that we're using those Diné fundamental laws around health. And then the SBNH, which is which is the Navajo way of living, to use that holistic paradigm to center our results within the 4 areas of knowledge. These knowledges are interrelated and interdependent. And we related those 4 areas to our focus group results, which is spiritual wellness, which is really about corn pollen, medicinal herbs, ceremonies and prayers, traditional knowledge, values and ethics. Economy and livelihood was really about the agricultural way of life in these communities, how it impacted their economy, their farming and ranching, their financial impacts. And the family community were related to the agencies that were involved in this spill, such as tribal, federal, state, the leaders, how it impacted the elders and the youth and their emotional health. And then the environment, how it impacted the plants, vegetation, the wildlife, the relationship of the people to the river and also their ecosystem. So the way we did the focus group was to analyze the focus groups using a culturally informed approach to more accurately capture subtle differences in the psychological, social, cultural, and spiritual impact of the Gold Camp mine spill. And so we use grounded theory and collective decision making. So being these 3, which is being that it's culturally informed, using a systematic approach, and then consensus driven. So for the analysis, at least one coder was a Navajo to support objective of recognizing the difference between cultural and spiritual elements in the statements that were made. So we adapted the SBNH model and then used Dr. Benally's Diné health model. And so from the first column on the far left, these show the different areas of the 4 categories within the SBNH Diné health model, and how they relate to the academic area, as well as the Diné way of thinking, Sahakes, East, Ane, and Hoan. And then the Diné Policy Institute, they had created their parallels to that, which is how we came up with the 4 categories in the exposure project that we use in the analysis. We also developed a code book and the consensus analysis for each node. For example, the spiritual risk. And we define the spiritual risks as risks to ability to practice religious beliefs, risks to sacred places and deities, trauma to individual due to stress that a sacred place or deity is being harmed or lost, and a risk to teachings directly related to interwoven with spiritual religious beliefs. So the inclusion criteria for this was statements that reference the Gold Camp mine spill posing a risk primarily to spirituality or religious practices, beliefs, or thinking, and included all religions, Navajo, Native American Church, Christianity, and non-categorized. And this also include cultural activities that reference spiritual beliefs, such as cultural activities using corn, such as steamed corn ceremonies, where the cultural belief is deeply interwoven with the spirituality and the belief. And so the belief is woven into the cultural activities or ceremonies, like the different ceremonies, beauty way, night way, coming of age, other healing ceremonies, chanting, spiritual offerings, sweats, and so forth. And this also includes other plants used in ceremonies and prayers, such as mountain smoke, baptism, and views of sacredness and holiness. So that's why we needed a coder to make sure they could discern between cultural risks and spiritual risks. And when in doubt, we recommended double coding when in doubt, so that we could quality check and verify for spiritual risks. So that's just an example of one code, but we were able to use that approach and categorize it into the 4. So for the spiritual wellness, the Gold King mine spill severely impacted the spiritual wellness of the Diné people. Diné felt that the natural materials and herbs along the San Juan River that were needed for ceremony were unsafe to use. For example, plants for baskets and medicine, clay and sandstones for sand painting. The Gold King mine spill impacted the Diné ability to continue their ceremonial practices. The Gold King mine spill threatened the Diné ability to pass on traditional knowledge and culture that was vital to the Diné identity to the next generation, and to engage in farming and ranching. Economy and livelihood impacts is the next category. The spill also created revenue loss and financial hardship for the farmers. The customers buying from the farmers no longer trusted the safety of the crop being sold, and as a result, consumers stopped buying the crop. The spill stigmatized and tarnished the reputation of Navajo farmers along the San Juan River. The loss of locally grown foods negatively impacted the healthy diet of Diné farmers and Diné who are buying the crops, because people start relying on commercial store-bought food. The Diné were also concerned about the long-term health impacts of the Gold King mine spill on future generations. Family and community impacts. Due to the spill, the family and communities became even more distrustful of the federal government. They didn't trust water testing. They didn't see transparent leadership in their communities, and they were unsure who was advocating on their behalf. They described poor communication from responsible community government entities about the spill and inadequate response to the spill. The spill induced negative impacts experienced by the Diné residents, including deterioration of their mental well-being, resulting in the worry, fear, depression, stress, and amplified historic trauma. Environmental impacts is the final category. The Diné had negative feelings towards the San Juan River after the Gold King mine spill. They worried about the safety of the San Juan River and the plants growing along the San Juan River, which they relied on for cultural and ceremonial purposes. They were concerned about the decline in the presence of traditional plants, and they were hesitant to have direct and indirect contact with the San Juan River. The spill significantly harmed Diné cultural practices as they began to use less of the traditional plants and herbs. Again, this disruption damaged their relationship with the San Juan River, and they felt a concerning silence in the environment. After the spill, they didn't trust the water quality testing along the river, and they wanted consistent water monitoring, data that water is safe, and information about who is testing the water. Community healing was really important even after we had concluded this project. And I want to share that I only shared one part of the project, which was focused on the perception of the people along the San Juan River to the spill, as well as impacts to the Diné activities and culture. And what we heard through this entire work was that community healing was so important to the people to move forward. And they're still healing to this day. Some people never returned back to farming. Some people did return back to farming, but it took a long time, longer than 3 years, to significantly trust that the water was safe to use. But it was important to have community support, to have education. Prayers was important to the healing. People do want to be compensated for the impacts. They want information. They're concerned about their own tradition, and that there should be communication around what had happened back in 2015, which we're coming to almost to the 9th anniversary of the spill. To learn to integrate traditional knowledge in developing the research questions and disseminating results, and also developing an emergency response, we use different ways of bilateral communication. This included listening sessions, focus groups, teach-ins, campus visit by the Navajo president and the vice president, and having community partners come to the university to be on a panel. We also worked at the household level to go individually to each home and report back the biomonitoring results, which I didn't present here, which was about looking at the lead and arsenic from measuring it in the blood and the urine. Also doing citizen science, which I know up in the upper reaches of the San Juan River in Colorado, they're really good with the citizen science for a long time. But looking at that, the lower reaches, we also brought community members up to the upper San Juan. We went to the Gold Key mine audit. We also met with people in the upper reaches and learned about their work and talked about impacts. And then the upper community members came down to Shiprock and met with the people and got to learn. And we also had radio forums. We did Shiprock Ag Days, and we continue to do our teach-ins there, but we're focused more on sustainability in our outreach. So in order to improve emergency response and to healing the community, we worked with many different organizations to report back the results. This include Diné healer organizations, the Navajo Northern Agency Council, working with the Diné grassroots organizations, as well as elected Navajo government in president, vice president, and the Navajo Nation Council. One of the things that we really heard in this work was that it was great to see young people. So we're treading new ground, and what these young people are doing is totally new. No one has done a study like this. This is a reawakening for the people. We had over 100 students involved in the project, and more than half of them were Native American. It was wonderful to bring the young people back to be part of this project, as well as working with the community partners and leaders to resolve and take an approach to work together. We can't be biased and place blame. We all have to come together it's going to take many generations to fix these issues. We greatly appreciate the funding we receive from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, the Agnes Nelms Howry Program, the Superfund Research Program, university centers, health sciences centers, centers for Indigenous environmental health research. There was many people that really helped to make it possible. Thank you so much. And again, I really apologize for the technical difficulties, and I hope I can take time to answer questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. What a spectacular talk. And as you pointed out in the conclusions, that a kind of study that is truly unique. And I took pictures of some of your slides as I was really interested in the research, the Indigenous research process, and a number of other folks. But I want to give Becky first, the first crack at any questions. So I will hand it over to you, Becky.
Thank you. So I was just kind of interested, like, I was just talking with Rebecca, who you know, and we were just kind of talking a little bit about possibly doing tree samples, so the dendrochronology, to take a look at what's happening with the seepage over there by the uranium mine. And, you know, that kind of came into, you know, one of my thoughts with the trees near that water, to talk about, you know, part of that damage and what the rings might be able to show. So I just kind of thought about that, and, you know, and I know that, you know, you have a lot of people who are, you know, with the livestock and stuff, and sometimes it's hard to keep them away from the water. So, you know, I was just kind of, you know, probably, you know, looking at that concern too. So, you know, but my question, I guess, is, you know, how have you tested it lately, and what does it look like now?
That's a great question. Yeah, so our work was it lasted about 5 years. So about 3 years was really well, we did a lot of sampling a year after the spill. And then that was to look at the short-term exposure. And then we also did some further work on looking at the impacts on a growing season. We also did surveys 3 years after. And then that was the extent of our work. So we're not doing any more, we didn't do any additional sampling or investigation after 5 years. But we do know that the tribes have established more monitoring stations in their region. And so we're not involved in that effort in terms of the what's going on right now.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. We have a question from one of the viewers that asks, what financial reparations, if any, have the Diné received from the federal government or the mine owners? A logical question on everyone's mind.
Yes, and I'm not too sure what that is. I've seen some news articles that yeah, I don't want to state anything about compensation. I'm not a lawyer, and yeah, I was just saying Google it. I know they're working on it, and I'm not sure what the status of compensation is.
I was interested kind of in the context under which you did the study. Was the exposure project part of a government mitigation effect for the spill, or was this just entirely initiated by you, or how did that work?
Oh, great question. Yes, so I'm part of the University of Arizona Superfund Research Program. I'm also an extension specialist. And as in my job, I bridge the university to communities as a land grant mission. And I primarily work with tribal communities. So in that work, in that role with my job, I had already been working with tribal colleges. So I work with Tohono O'odham Community College, Diné College and many other communities out there around water. And so I had been working in Shiprock with the Diné Environmental Institute, working with the tribal colleges. And then also we have tribal extension agents based in Shiprock. So Jeannie Benali was our extension agent. And so, you know, just being out there and providing trainings through the Shiprock Ag Days, I knew the community and I knew the extension agent. So when this spill happened, they reached out to me and they had a lot of questions and they asked me, can you please like help us decipher, you know, what's going on, the results that are being presented. These are our questions. And so we quickly wrote up a fact sheet within 2 weeks for Jeannie Benali. And so she was able to use that to pass out to the farmers. And then they still had concerns. So we had a listening session to find out what their concerns were. And then from that, we wrote up 2 concept proposals that we submitted to the Navajo Nation Department of Water Resources. And then they selected what they wanted us to pursue, which was the exposure. And then from there, we submitted a grant to the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, R21 mechanism, which is a rapid response to address these kinds of emergencies. And we were able to get a rapid turnaround. And then it took us about 6 months to get approval by the Navajo Human Research Review Board. So we officially started in December of 2015.
Oh, fantastic! That's a fascinating process by which for the project to unfold, which has obviously had some very eye-opening results, particularly given the different categories that you looked at. What are your sort of hopes that these results might influence regulatory agencies and decision makers going forward?
I think it has really benefited the Navajo Nation because they were able to quantify, get data right after the spill, which I think is unprecedented. And also to get those activities quantified and what was the impact, doing the biomonitoring results. Like that was all real-time data that was collected and beneficial to the Navajo Nation in their advocacy to show what was the impact to the people. So I think it's really been really good for the Navajo Nation, and it's also shown other tribal communities what can be done because EPA does have a risk assessment they use, but we know that tribal communities have really deep connections to the land. They use the land for many different purposes, you know, even beyond just the livelihoods. It's like spiritual, cultural activities, and a lot of times this goes unrecognized. So through our work, we have been able to demonstrate quantified results. We've been able to do the risk assessment modeling, and all of that as an example for tribal communities and for federal entities and agencies to see, like, tribal communities, when these kinds of environmental catastrophes happen, you have to really think deeper about those impacts to the people. And so this is a model for other tribal communities to use and share and use in their advocacies and share it with federal entities and say, hey, you can't just get by with just doing a recreational assessment. You got to look at the spiritual. And we also used an example from a community in Idaho where their salmon was impacted. And so we're aware of that other example as well. So it's just a way to replicate it into other tribal communities.
No, it's a fantastic framework. We have a question that has come in from one of the listeners who asks if you perceived a significant difference in attitudes and beliefs through your efforts to educate and communicate about this spill with respect to recognizing that long-term implications still remain from the spill.
Okay, so I'm assuming the attitudes and behaviors of the Diné people is what I'll answer to. And I think through the education that, well, it's mostly dissemination of the results that we collected and sharing that. It helped some farmers be comfortable with using the river for agricultural purposes. And it helped them to understand the impacts and be more aware of what's going on upstream and what to look out for. And that the Navajo Nation does have more monitoring going on right now, and so they can get access to that information. So overall, I think people, it's just a wake-up call for the communities and agencies. And but there are thousands of mines still located up there. So it's not gonna go away. This is an ongoing issue. And people have to have be alert and to have emergency response plans in place.
Yeah, no, that's it definitely is a wake-up call and an excellent framework that now people have in place to be able to assess and predict risk. Another one of our viewers has asked, to what extent have people resumed cultural and spiritual activities connected to the river?
That's a good question. I think we didn't really assess that particular activity. We just quantified how many people were engaging in different types of activities. In terms of farming, we did ask how many people are going back to farming. And initially, the percentages was pretty big in terms of people not farming. And then it took like about 3 years for at least a quarter of those people to go back to farming. And again, you know, some people still have not gone back to farming, and what percentage of that, I don't know.
Kind of along the lines of some of the questions and comments that Becky had, someone had asked about the results of any testing of people or livestock or corn. I'm assuming from contamination. Was that a part of your study?
Yeah, that was led by Jenny Ingram. She's a professor at Northern Arizona University. But I think one of the challenges was initially she wanted to get some samples of livestock, but it was very difficult to get those kinds of samples, you know, like when people are butchering to get a sample. So I don't think that went very far, but she was able to get corn samples, and she did some studies on that, and I believe she has a paper on it as well, so you can Google her work on that one. And it looks like she didn't find an impact to the corn.
I'm sure. I know this isn't really in the scope of your work, but our viewers, it really it begs the question of, and we have some questions along this about, is the mine held responsible by regulatory agencies or other parties for the spill?
Yeah, that's an ongoing litigation that's going on right now. They are being held responsible, so it's going through the courts. And they're being held responsible for that. And I think the question is what is the compensation?
Right.
And so yeah, that's being, I think, adjudicated right now.
Thank you. Well, we're right at 5 o'clock and we want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for sharing these results firsthand. Really incredible study and a really incredible model for a research process that incorporates community healing and capacity building and data sovereignty, which is something that any research project, I think, could be mindful to incorporate into their goals. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
And you are welcome anytime. Just let us know.